A drag show fundraiser planned at West Texas A&M University was canceled by the university's president for being too divisive, raising alarm bells among First Amendment advocates. In a letter sent to students titled, "A Harmless Drag Show? No Such Thing," President Walter Wendler said the scheduled performance would not be happening and claimed drag shows discriminate against women, writing, quote, "Does a drag show preserve a single thread of human dignity? I think not." Wendler went on to compare drag shows to performing in blackface and said he could not support such an event on campus. Quote, "Drag shows are derisive, divisive, demoralizing misogyny."
Proceeds of the show were set to benefit the Trevor Project, which is a suicide prevention organization for LGBTQ plus youth. The Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression responded to Wendler, writing, quote, "As an individual, Wendler can criticize this particular drag show or the existence of drag at large. No reasonable person would argue that public university administrators personally endorse the views expressed by every event hosted by every student group on campus. But as a government actor, President Wendler cannot co-opt state power to force his own views on the community," which is completely correct. This is a transparent First Amendment violation. I mean, you can set aside one's personal feelings about drag. This is a public university for adults. This is not involving like little kids being exposed to sexually explicit material. This is adults, and it's a public university, and the president cannot. They couldn't say you can't have a pro-life event. They couldn't say you can't have a pro-Second Amendment event. They don't get to discriminate ideologically against events. You get to, whenever, I mean, conservatives have become very famous for complaining about when liberal students or administrators, shut down the Ben Shapiro event or the Heather McDonald event or the Christina Hoff Sommers event or whatever it is. That's because that is bad and counter to the spirit of the First Amendment, and it's a public university campus. This is the same. The president cannot. I mean, he should resign.
I mean, and often
understood the First Amendment so poorly.
And often the critique of liberals by conservatives is that not even that an event was shut down, but that it was booed or protested or students turned their backs or something like that. Which again, now we're having a conversation.
There was a phase where they were getting the heckling would get them to they would make threats and then the administration would shut it down.
Sure, but I mean, the last one we talked about on the show, I think it was at a Florida university. There was protesting on a stairwell outside, and that still became a problem that justified, a bunch of people complaining about the hecklers, and then now whose First Amendment rights to protest prevail, et cetera, et cetera. In this context, I gotta say, as much as I'm no fan of blackface, I don't even know that the president can step in and say, that is prohibited on campus.
No,
all kinds of events happen on campus. There was a movie that was popular a few years ago called Dear White People that was notable because in the end credits, the movie was about kind of racist party themes on campus, and at the end of the movie they had real life footage, like cell phone footage of like a montage of all of the like pimps and hoes style parties where people were dressed up as black folks at all of these predominantly white institutions. That sort of thing happens all the time on college campuses. Trudeau was famously pictured in a blackface gown.
A man who loves to dress up. That man loves costumes.
So this isn't about what we approve of. It's about what is usually permitted to happen on a college campus. I mean,
this letter from the president is wild. I believe every human being is created in the image of God, therefore a person of dignity, being created in God's image is basic and natural. And it's fine. You can have that opinion. That's totally fine. But this is or you could be a president of like a Christian university that doesn't have that is not bound to follow the First Amendment, it doesn't take public funding. That's all fine too, but he's the president of a public university.
Yeah, we had a drag event, I guess you could call it that, but it was men. It's a theater performance, the Hasty Pudding theater performance, where people routinely dress up in a gender other than their own. And it's like a historical tradition on Harvard's campus. Yeah. There's just so much stuff that will get caught up in rules like this.
That's what I tweet. Actually, that was a tweet I had in response to this. I'm like, are we forgetting that drag was a common element of the military for like the last 200 years?
Shakespeare.
Because there weren't any women, so like South Pacific.
Yes.
That kind of stuff. It's not always.
Wash that man right out of my hair.
It's not always. I know what I mean. I guess the good faith conservative criticism right now is that they don't like the very sexually explicit ones, and they don't like being with and children attending them. Fine, but this is
well,
that's
we don't know if this was sexually explicit
right,
or not, and there's certainly no children involved here.
Right.
Well, actor Billy Porter spoke out on the new discourse over drag queens while on The View this week. Let's take a listen.
Follow the money, follow the power at any cost. It's very hypocritical. You know, the leading cause of death in children are guns.
Yes. Yeah.
They're guns.
Yeah.
I know it's the morning and I'm not supposed to be screaming, but they're guns.
Yeah.
Not
drag queens.
Not drag queens.
No.
Leave us alone.
Yes.
You know, and it's a distraction. It's a distraction on purpose. We don't know what to pay. We don't know what to pay attention to. You know, our justice system is convoluted. It's hard to understand on purpose. Let's be clear about that.
Yeah.
It's on purpose. You know, it was like when we were talking about Roe v. Wade, that the word codified came up. I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
And y'all didn't do it for 50 years?
Yeah.
What's happening?
Yeah.
You know, subpoenas. If any one of us is subpoenaed, and we don't go, we end up in jail,
You
right?
get a little perp walk.
What are we talking about, and what are we doing? And everybody's so scared because, if we do that, then we might have a civil war. We're already in a civil war, y'all. It's a civil war of the mind.
We're already in a civil war. I guess him and Tim Pool in agreement, I guess.
Look, that stuff at the end aside, I think he was making some really good points about how this discourse can start to skew what our political priorities are. This is something that came up on this show recently, where there was a debate about whether or not we should be more attentive to things about, like the fact that most child death, the leading cause of child death in this country is gun violence, certainly not drag shows, and even to the extent that you're concerned about grooming and sexual content that kids are being exposed to, when you look down the list of what groups are routinely perpetrators of sexual violence against children, it's institutions like the church and institutions of people who are in more proximity with children and who are trusted in their care, not public shows that a small fraction of parents even choose to bring children to in the first place. That's like blaming a rated R movie for a rampant child molestation because some parent somewhere takes their child to go see it.
Yeah, there's sexual abuse in non-Christian schools as well.
Of course.
But there's very little, bordering on none, being perpetrated by drag people.
Yeah,
children. It is a little bit. I mean, I think Billy Porter was he was enunciating very powerfully. I don't know if all of the underlying points there were. I'm not sure what the follow the money, follow the power necessarily has to do in this. Well,
I say this on the show all the time. I do think there's an argument that when you have people like Christopher Rufo being funded and explicitly saying that his goal is to use words with wishy-washy meanings, with flexible meanings, with meanings that are not entirely understood, like CRT, like woke, and to use those as a focal point for people to project their ire, some of it legitimate, some of it not, and to expand a coalition of people who think they're mad at something. That is, yes, a distraction from the substantive economic issues that working class people, including working class populist right-leaning Republicans, absolutely want their political leaders to be responsive to. But you know, Ron DeSantis is not saying we're going to make Florida a place where everyone gets a living wage and, you know, where people can afford rent. He's saying I want to make Florida the place where woke goes to die. Those are political choices that are being made. And does the fact that he is able, you know, if he weren't able to talk about the wokeness, would there be a more noticeable void in what some of these politicians are offering up prescriptively for their constituents?
And it also speaks to, I totally lost what my train of thought was coming out of that.
Well, I mean, while you're thinking about it, I think it's also true, by the way, I just would add that the Democrats do some version of this as well. There's Democrats who get on TV, I talked about this in my radar a little bit, and say, well, we care about gay people, and we care about black people, and we care about immigrants, and therefore don't notice that we're also not offering anything substantively to any of those groups.
I remember what I wanted to say. No, I want to go back to the Civil War rhetoric for a minute, though. It is interesting to see him say that, though, because Conservatives, I take a lot of flack for saying that we should have like a national divorce and a separate. I mean, this is why I've said it's not. Even if you think the idea doesn't make a lot of sense, in theory, at least, there could be some Democrats or liberals or leftist people who support going their own way. Who, you know, what if we didn't? What if we just had different rules and like you want to live under different rules and I want to live under different rules? We could just have.
Well, isn't
different.
That's not what federalism was supposed to be in the
Right,
first
exactly.
place. Well,
we're supposed to the extent we can, devolve decision making to local. At the more and more local level, and get out of each other's hair, and that would be a happier, saner place.
Yeah, the problem is that communities are much more local than the state level. And while there are elites, I think, in both parties that are really excited about the idea of a national divorce because they can pick up and go, and they've already used their kind of economic freedom to live where they want to live, you know, some California bourgeois type might say, yes, let's divorce from the rest of the country. But, you know, most Black Americans live in red states because we lived where we used to work when we worked for free. And so, I mean, those are the kinds of things that people overlook. And we live in communities. And even when we disagree politically, many of us have families that are ideologically diverse. And, you know, I value being an American. And I think you said this as well. I value all parts of the American community. And I think it's it speaks very poorly of where we are as a community that we would even jump to that kind of a place and believe that the divisions are that deep when I in fact believe that they aren't, and that conversations about things like drag brunches, which is truly just not an issue for anybody.
I think it shows you that the rhetoric of total war of we're in a civil war can actually, I see it appeals to liberals as well.
Yeah, I agree. But if we were talking about healthcare, if we were talking about a living wage, if we were talking about the housing crisis, this would not seem like a divisive conversation and people would not be talking about a civil war. And we have to start asking ourselves, why is it that we're not talking about those things? Why is it that we're always pushed to talk about your favorite drag brunch performer?
Disagree as bitterly on those things as well. But we'll disagree on those things, but we don't actually disagree on the drag performer.
This weekend,
we can disagree
Robby.
over drag brunch. Okay. Well, tomorrow on Rising, we'll be back with more of the great Rising coverage you know and love.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who prefer to listen while on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
They're going to be playing this music in clubs very soon. It's going to be like the White Lotus soundtrack, which they play in clubs. We're going to hear it. We're going to be dropping a sick beat.
Yeah, maybe even, Robby, at a drag brunch.
All right. See you later.
See you later. Bye-bye.